Welcome to Forthright. When the state legislature is in session, there's never a lack of topics for a politically minded columnist. The headline for today's featured column: Single Party Domination of Legislature Denies Good Ideas a Hearing. Originally published March 16, 2023 in the Spokesman Review. In a single-party dominated legislature, the future of any bill is often predictable along partisan lines. The majority party controls access to hearings. It's an easy excuse to just say there's not enough time, or the issue is too controversial, or it won't have enough votes to pass, so why bother? Sometimes the majority just doesn't want to talk about controversial issues, challenging their version of the world. Good bills sponsored by the minority party are often denied even the courtesy of a hearing. It's not a problem unique to Washington. Many states face the same challenge, but today's focus is on Olympia. Public safety polled as a top concern for Washington voters in 2022, so one might assume a legislative focus on public safety. Supporters of one bill sailing through the legislature were characterized as saying, "Penalties are a deterrent and increasing them will send a clear message," end quote, according to recent reporting in this paper. But that was coverage of House Bill 1002 to bump up the penalties for college hazing, which regrettably ended in tragedy in 2019 in Pullman. That bill was supported by all Spokane area representatives in the House and has moved on to the Senate. On the other hand, Republican-sponsored bills, HB 1161 and Senate Bill 5745, increasing penalties for using or displaying an illegally possessed firearm in the commission of a crime, didn't even get a hearing. They were bottled up in committee by the Democratic majority. According to Attorney William Kirk at a Washington gun law lecture last weekend, 88.8% of all gun crime in the U.S. in 2021 was committed by a person who unlawfully possessed a firearm, end quote. Given the progress through the legislature of several constitutionally questionable bills, in other words, they may be a waste of time, but it's a great opportunity to score political points with the base, it appears the majority party is more interested in hearing bills targeting legal gun owners than bills deterring criminals. Another bill getting the proud "look what we did" treatment by House Democrats is HB 1455 to ban child marriage, raising the minimum age of consent from 17 to 18 for making a decision on what is supposed to be a lifetime commitment. The intent is to prevent sex trafficking and intercept abusive relationships before they start because the sponsors say minors are too susceptible to social pressure. On the other hand, again, Democrats refuse to hear HB 1214, which would make 18 the minimum age to consent to gender-altering chemical treatments resulting in a lifetime of negative health impacts ranging from infertility and increased cardiovascular risks to loss of bone density and increased cancer risks. And Democrat-sponsored SB 5489 would have included surgery as a protected form of gender-affirming health care. Fortunately, it died in committee, but it did get a hearing. So a child only has to be 13 years old to consent to what is called gender-affirming health care. Parents don't have to be in the loop on the decision, even if the billing office doesn't have to tell them what they are paying for. Clearly, HB 1214 didn't get a hearing because the validity of the age of consent arguments used by Democrats to defend their preferred bills would dissolve in a puff of logic. We don't let 18-year-olds buy tobacco and alcohol in the state, but we let 13-year-olds buy off-label cross-sex hormones and consent to life-altering surgery? That's nuts. Most of the bills ignored by the Democratic majority address less politically controversial issues. A few of the bills on the House Republicans' list of priorities for 2023 have even made progress. HB 1682, to address rising auto theft, had bipartisan sponsorship, including Representative Jacqueline Maycumber, Republican from Republic, Representative Marcus Riccelli, Democrat from Spokane, and Representative Mike Volz, a Republican from Spokane. HB 1245 tackles housing affordability by allowing lot splitting, championed by Representative Andrew Barkus, a Republican of Chehalis, and co-sponsored by Riccelli. HB 1210 allows school board meetings to be recorded. All three passed in the House and have been sent to the Senate. And once more, on the other hand, the majority of Washingtonians who don't claim allegiance to any political party might have appreciated a robust debate and public hearings on a broader range of solutions to community safety, housing, and education issues. Among the bills on the House Republicans' list were proposals to resolve the impact of the Blake decision by recriminalizing the known possession of fentanyl, HB 1415, provide a temporary program to address the learning loss from 2 years of emergency operations that hit students in low-income districts particularly hard, HB 1328, and modest sales tax relief in a time of high inflation as well as growing state revenues, HB 1704. All 3 Republican bills died in committee without a hearing. That's one way to keep the process moving. It takes more time, and it might be controversial to entertain a diversity of ideas. Reach out to provide equity and access to the process and be inclusive of everyone. So why bother? Columns pleading for good governance don't usually draw a lot of reader feedback, but I did enjoy this affirmation of my column from former state senator and current Spokane County Treasurer Mike Baumgartner. Mike writes, I enjoyed your column about one-party committee hearings. In fact, when I was chair of Commerce and Labor, I used to let the minority-ranking Democrat member have one committee a year where they could hear whatever bills they wanted to. I always thought it was a pretty easy gesture. It made them happy and easier to work with. I wasn't afraid to hear bills I might disagree with, and in any event, they didn't have the votes to get them out of the committee. But strangely, however, the same Democrat did not return the courtesy to me when they took the majority in my last year in the Senate. Still, it was a good idea if all committee chairs adopted and would make the legislature work better and better serve the public. And because that was from Mike. Thanks for the compliment, Mike. I appreciate your feedback on the process. And yeah, I agree that you should be willing to hear other people's point of view. And then another reader feedback, because there's always someone ready to keep me humble, from a reader name I'll just identify as Jim J. You are completely off the rails. I would usually do a point-by-point discussion of an article, but in this case that would be a waste of my time. You do not seem to be connected with reality. Why the spokesman gives you space is beyond my comprehension, as there is very little truth in your op-eds. Well, that's his opinion, to which I replied, Jim, the point is that the majority Democrats control what bills get a hearing, and that's an indisputable fact. It's not something that another local political columnist is likely to point out, which is why the Spokesman Review pays me to provide balance. Thank you for taking the time to provide your feedback and for being a reader, with a smiley face. I have come to terms with the fact that I use a lot of smiling emojis in my social media to stand in for the smiles I would use in face-to-face conversations to discussing policy, to emphasize that a policy disagreement isn't personal. And legislators have told me that the lack of face-to-face time in the last 2 years has seriously impacted the opportunities for all voices to be heard. Anybody who's attended any kind of a conference where there's formal meeting sessions knows that those conversations where you bump into people in the corridor are pretty impactful. We come up with stronger solutions, and we reduce the chances for unintended consequences when there's real diversity of thought in the room, including voices from those with a different experience and perspective on the world who are willing to speak up. So thanks for listening today to me, and be sure to subscribe on Substack for notification of new content.